Hey guys, welcome back. For this video, we're going to be discussing 5.1, which is writing equations in slope-intercept form. You can see what our goals are. We're going to write an equation in that form, given a slope in 1 point, and we're going to do it again when we're given just 2 points. This should go by pretty quick for some of you. You're probably already familiar with how this works. Okay, so here's our first one. Write in an equation in slope-intercept form. Well, first of all, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. And remember, the y-intercept occurs when you have a 0 in for x. So we're going to keep that in mind as we solve this. So there's really only two things we got to find, is the slope and the y-intercept. Well, as it turns out, they've already given part of it to us. They've given us the slope. So we want it to go through this point but have that slope. So we know that m has to equal 2/3 to begin with. So if I write the equation all over, y equals mx plus b, in place of m, we could put 2/3. Now what we're still missing is the b part of it. And right now, all we have is an m. However, remember this up here in this ordered pair, that's an x and that's y. It turns out I have an x and a y right there, which means we can substitute x and y in and work backwards for b. So in place of x, I'm going to put a 3, and in place of y, I'm going to put my -4, and I'm just going to keep the intercept as plus b, so I'm just going to solve for b. So the first thing we get here is 2/3 times 3, which is 2. So -4 is equal to 2 plus b. So now to get rid of the 2 so I can get b by itself is -2 on both sides. And b ends up equaling -6. So now that we have our b value and we have our m value, we can write our equation in slope-intercept form, which is y equals 2/3 x minus 6. Got to make sure that you have a y and an x in the problem. I see too often students are leaving a -4 in there and a 3 in there, and this doesn't really do anything for us. We got to leave the values of x and y as variables as the final result. Okay, so here we have an example that's in a word problem. Marissa's baking a recipe. It calls for her to turn down the temperature. Write an equation, represent the situation. If the temperature in the oven drops 25 degrees every 30 seconds, so that right there is a slope. So 25 degrees of drop for over every 30 seconds. And I notice that this second part here is in minutes, so I'm actually going to put that as a half minute. The second part they tell us is after 2 minutes the temperature is 350. Well, that's an ordered pair. Now remember, in most cases, time is your domain, so we're going to write that as 2, 350. So that's my x and my y values. But we do have a little bit of an issue here. This number is in minutes, and this number here is in seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this right here into seconds. So if I have 30 seconds on the bottom, let me write that as 30 seconds. So if I have 30 seconds on the bottom, I'm going to times by 2 to make that into 60 seconds, which is 1 minute, which means I got to times the top one by 2, which gives me 50. But remember, this is 60 seconds, which we're going to rewrite as 1 minute. So the slope here is 50 degrees per minute of drop. Now I should put a negative on there because it says up here, it says she's dropping 50 degrees or 25 degrees every 30 seconds, which is 50 degrees every 1 minute. So m equals -50. And to write my equation, I got to solve for the b. So I need to find out what is b equal. So I'll first write my equation, y equals mx plus b, and then I'll drop some points into it. So in place of m, I'm going to put -50. In place of x, I'm going to bring my x value of 2 over, and I'm going to leave a plus b on this side, and then put a 350 on this side. Then go ahead and solve for b, so multiply these together, I get -100 plus b, 350, and then I'm going to add 100 to both sides, so b will end up equaling 450. So our final equation here will end up being y equals, now the m comes next, which is -50 degrees per minute, times x, which will be the number of minutes, plus the y-intercept of 450, so the y-intercept is our starting point. Okay, so here we have a scenario where we have 2 points and not a slope. So the first thing you want to calculate is slope. So step one, calculate slope first. Calculate the slope first. Okay, so I'm going to grab my point over here, stack it under this side, so 1.2 comma negative 0.7. Remember, there is the traditional formula of y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That equals slope, but I prefer to stack them like this, and I'll just do a subtract. So I'll do 1.6 minus a negative 1.7, which means I'm really adding 0.7 or 0.7. So that ends up with 2.3. So that's my change in y over. I can do my change in x, which is going to be negative 3.4 minus 1.2. And that's going to give me a negative 4.6. That's my change in x. So if I look at that closely, I can see that that's actually negative 1/2 or negative 0.5. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use negative 0.5 only because my values here are in decimal forms. So now I got to write the equation by finding the b value. So I found m. This is my m. Now I got to find my y-intercept. So I'll start with y equals mx plus b, and then I'll drop some values in there. In place of m, I'm going to put negative 0.5. In place of x, so I got to go back to choose. I got to choose one of these 2 points. It doesn't really matter which point I choose. I got to choose one of them. So I'm going to choose this one on this side. So the x value there is 1.2 plus b, and I have negative 0.7 on the other side. Now I got to solve for b. So negative 0.5 times 1.2 is going to give me a negative 0.6 plus b, and that's still equal to negative 0.7. And then to get b by itself, I'm going to add 0.6 to both sides. So my b value ends up equaling, it looks like negative 0.1. So I have a really small b value. So the final equation, I'm going to erase this here in the middle. So the final equation is y equals, I've got my slope of negative 0.5x. Then I have a negative here, so instead of putting plus negative, I'm just going to put minus 0.1, and this right here ends up being my slope, or my equation. Okay, I'm going to do one more of these before we wrap it up. First thing I got to do is calculate slope. So what is the slope? What is it equal to? I'm going to plot my points right underneath here, and I'm going to do a subtraction. So 2, take that back, 2 minus 6 is going to give me a negative 4 over, and then 9 minus negative 2 is really plus 2, that's 11. So I have a really ugly slope of negative 4/11, but I'm going to just deal with it. Now I've got to calculate the b value. So this is my m, I got to calculate b. What does b equal? So I'm going to start with y equals mx plus b, and then I'm going to drop into the problem some points or some information. So I know that m is negative 4/11, so that's my m value. I'm going to choose to use, I'm going to go with this value right here. So I'm going to choose that point. So that's going to be my x and my y values. So negative 2, and then 6 is the y value, and then plus b. And then I'm going to go ahead and solve for b. So bring down my 6. Negative 4/11 times negative 2 is negative, or positive actually, positive 8/11. That's equal to b. Now in order to do my subtraction here, I want to subtract the 8/11. I want to convert the 6 into 11. So I'm going to call this 66/11 equals 8/11. There should be a plus b up here, by the way, plus b. And then I'm going to subtract my 8/11 from both sides. So when I subtract 8/11 from both sides, I end up with 56/11 equals b. And this is my b value, my y-intercept. They're not pretty. Neither one of them are pretty. But my final equation then would be y equals, my slope is negative 4/11. That's what I had up here. And my y-intercept is down here. So 56 is positive 56/11. So plus, I forgot my x, plus 56/11. And this is our final equation in slope-intercept form.